So what's a broken promise worth? Well, if you're the Indian government, the answer might just be $30 billion. Today we're diving into one of the biggest, most high-stakes corporate legal battles happening anywhere on the planet. It's a real clash of titans, a nation versus two global energy giants. Just look at that number, $30 billion. That is the unbelievable sum the Indian government is reportedly going after in this massive arbitration case. You know, a number that big doesn't just make headlines, it could literally reshape the entire energy landscape in the country.
And that brings us to the main question, right? Why? Why this record-breaking amount? What on earth could have happened deep under the ocean to spark what might just be the largest corporate claim in India's entire history?
Okay, so before we get into the weeds, let's meet the key players in this high-stakes drama.
So on one side of the ring, you've got the Indian government. They're the claimant here, basically saying, hey, these are our natural resources. And on the other side, you have two absolute corporate heavyweights, Reliance Industries, a huge Indian conglomerate that was running the show, and their partner, the global energy giant BP.
All right, so now that we know who's involved, let's get to the what. The real heart of this whole conflict is buried deep beneath the ocean's surface. Believe it or not, this entire $30 billion fight really boils down to two specific gas fields. It all comes down to what happened, or maybe more importantly, what didn't happen in these D1 and D3 fields, which are part of this massive offshore area known as KG-D6.
Now, the whole relationship was built on something called a production sharing contract. The idea is actually pretty simple. The government owns all the natural gas under the ground, right? And it gives companies the right to come in and pull it out. In exchange for that right, the government gets a piece of the action, a share of the production or the profits. Everything, and I mean everything, hinges on this one agreement.
And this is where things start to go sideways. See, when this whole project kicked off, the projection was that they could get about 10 trillion cubic feet of gas out of there. But what was actually extracted? Just a tiny fraction of that. I mean, look at that gap. It's a massive difference between what was promised and what was actually delivered.
Okay, so with a shortfall that huge, the big question is, who's to blame? Let's take a look at the two very, very different stories coming from each side. At its core, the disagreement is pretty straightforward. The government's claim is that the companies completely mismanaged the field, and because of that, they need to pay up for all the gas that was lost. The company's response? It's just as blunt. They're basically saying the government's claims and those huge numbers you hear about are just plain wrong. So let's dig into what the government is actually alleging. First, they claim that the companies got too aggressive with their production methods and actually damaged the underground reservoir. They also point out that way fewer wells were drilled than what was originally planned. So the government's whole argument is that these actions are the reason most of the gas is still stuck down there, and therefore, the companies owe the state for its value.
Now, Reliance's public response has been pretty direct. They've stated that those compensation figures are factually incorrect. They also say the matter remains sub judice, which is just a legal way of saying, hey, this is still being decided in arbitration, so we really can't comment on it. BP has also stayed quiet on the matter.
So with both sides totally dug in, where does this all go from here? Well, the final verdict, whatever it comes, could have some truly enormous consequences.
And let me tell you, this has been a long, long fight. The whole arbitration process kicked off way back in 2016. The final arguments just wrapped up in late 2023. And we're not expecting a final ruling until sometime in mid-2026. And even that might not be the end of it. The decision could still be challenged in Indian courts.
So you might be wondering, okay, it's a big corporate legal fight. Why should I care? Well, the implications of this case are absolutely huge. A ruling of this size would set a massive precedent for foreign investment and energy projects in India. It's a major test of the country's credibility in handling these complicated contracts. And if it's upheld, it would go down in history as the largest claim of its kind ever pursued by the government.
And you know, this really brings us to the fundamental question at the heart of this entire thing. A question that goes way beyond this one gas field. How does a nation strike that perfect balance? How do you hold powerful corporations accountable for managing your resources, while at the same time making sure you're still seen as a reliable and attractive place for the kind of foreign investment you need to grow? That, right there, is the $30 billion question.